Hello, it's poetry time again. So today I'm going to read a poem called Evolution of My Block by Jacob Saenz. And this poem is basically a description of growing up in a gang dominated neighborhood from the perspective of a poet who didn't go into a gang. He kind of avoided that influence, but he was surrounded by it. And my approach to the poem today will be I will just do a line by line reading, trying to break down the meaning of it as I go, and then I'll just read through the poem one more time without interruption. Um, Now, in the poem, there are some things that may not always be so easy to follow, not because of some of the vocabulary that you might see in academic writing, but because of the use of slang and cultural references that might be beyond your experience. Also, poets are free to write in ways that don't follow rules, so the poet uses in writing, you'll see a W slash as a shorthand for with. It's used a lot in there. That's sometimes used when writing in shorthand, usually not in writing full sentences or in writing poems. But this poet, like so many poets, is being free in writing the way that he chooses. So, looking at the poem from the beginning, as a boy, I bicycled the block with a brown mop top falling into a tail bleached blonde. So he's just describing his hairstyle. A lot of hair up on top and one of those rat tails in the back. Riding his bike. Gold like under golden light. So he's describing his bleached blonde hair again and driving in the gold light of the streets. Like colors of noble knights banging on corners, unconcerned with the colors I bore. So at that time, the noble knights were the dominant gang in the area, gang banging, fighting out on the streets. But they didn't care about this young kid and the way he looked. Why? A shorty too small to war with. So he was a little kid, not yet grown up to the point where he would be expected to fight. Too brown to be down for the block. And maybe it takes some context to understand this. So the noble knights, we're talking about real street gangs in Chicago. The noble knights were kind of a mixed Latin and white gang, and maybe at this time there weren't so many dark-skinned Latin kids in the gang. That changes. White knights became brown kings, still showing black and gold on corners now crowned. So that's where the gang affiliation is changing a little bit. It's starting to be dominated now by the Latin kings. So someone like Jacob Saenz might be more the type of kid who would be affiliated with a gang like that. Black and gold being their gang colors, and corners now crowned. That is, they had the Latin king graffiti sign of a crown being posted here and there. The block a branch branded with La Corona graffitied on garage doors by the pawns. So it's just one of many Latin king sets, one branch of that gang, branded, marked with La Corona. La Corona is just Spanish for the crown. So there are crowns graffitied all over the neighborhood. Where it says the pawns, to tell the truth, I'm just kind of guessing at the meaning here. My first thought was maybe he was talking about near pawn shops or something, but logically I'm thinking if the leaders of the gang are the Latin kings, pawns could be a term that they used for their baby gangsters. The wannabes, the younger kids who aren't yet in the gang but who are trying to affiliate with the gang. Anyway, not so sure. In common English, to call someone a pawn means to say that there's someone who has less power and they're kind of used by the powers that be. But anyway, some young kids are running around spray painting crown graffiti. Okay? As a teen, I could have beamed the crown, walked in without the beatdown custom. So he's saying when he became a teenager, he could have joined the gang. He could have been out there, able to flash the gang sign, which, crown like, right? And he could have walked in without the beatdown custom. Some gangs are expected to have a kind of initiation where you come in and you might get beat up by members of the gang before you become a member. Not every gang does that kind of thing. A lot of gangs don't. And he, being close with the members and having been part of the community, could have probably just joined up with no such initiation. That's what he's talking about. Warred with my cousin who claimed 2-6, the set on the next block, decked in black and beige. So if he had joined up with the Latin King set, he would be enemy of his own cousin at this point, right? Because his cousin is in a different gang, the 2-6 gang, which are rivals of the Latin Kings, at least at the time that this is written. All right? But I preferred games to gangs, books to crooks wearing hats crooked to the left or right. Again, more relating to gang culture, right? So he didn't want to be a part of the gang. He was someone who just liked to play games, liked to read, and he wasn't interested in being in one of those gangs which affiliate, like which side the hat is tilted to could show what gang you're in or what set within the gang. That's what he's talking about. That was not the thing that he wanted to do with his life, right? Fighting for a plot, a block to spot and mark with blood of boys who knew no better way to grow up than throw up the crown and be down for whatever. So he didn't want to be a part of that culture, or at least it just wasn't natural to him to be that way. To be with a group of kids who fight just to establish a territory. Like, this is our spot, and we're going to beat up the kids who are of another set and be down for whatever. Be ready to fight, no concerns. That's what they're talking about, right? So, I'll go ahead and read through it straight, but I think at this point you should be able to see it's a story of a kid who's surrounded by the culture, but doesn't quite get drawn into it. He lives his own way. He doesn't have to become a gangster. He gets along. But the people that he knows and the people around him are being drawn into a really dangerous lifestyle, actually. Because they just don't know another way. At least that's the way he presents it. So, one more time. Title of the poem is Evolution of My Block. As a boy, I bicycled the block with a brown mop top falling into a tail bleached blonde, gold-like under golden light, like colors of noble knights, banging on corners unconcerned with the colors I bore, a shorty too small to war with, too brown to be down for the block. White knights became brown kings, still showing black and gold on corners now crowned, the block a branch branded with a corona, graffitied on garage doors by the pawns. As a teen, I could have beamed the crown, walked in without the beat-down custom, warred with my cousin who claimed 2-6, the set on the next block, decked in black and beige. But I preferred games to gangs, books to crooks wearing hats crooked to the left or right, fighting for a block to spot and mark with blood of boys who knew no better way to grow up than throw up the crown and be down for whatever. I made one little slip while reading that poem. I should have said La Corona instead of a Corona. But you got the idea. He's talking about his experience in this community. And so for our discussion, or something that you'd just like to think about after you hear or read this poem, I'd like you to think about what kind of influences are in your life. What influences the way you might grow up. And we can also talk about how is it that some people manage to avoid the dangerous or negative influences that could draw them into a harmful way of living. Okay? So think about that, and meanwhile, I'll move on and I'll speak to you with our next poem tomorrow. Goodbye.